Hi, it's Monday at 10 o'clock, and that means it's time for me to continue working on the Lotus-Ford model, the model of the car that won the 1965 Indianapolis 500 and is said to have changed racing forever, which is, kind of true. It was the first rear or mid, they call it mid, but it was kind of rear engine car to win the Indianapolis 500, and after that, no front engine car ever did again. So yeah, to change things, but it wasn't groundbreaking in 1965. They really started introducing these in 63, and one of them actually was running in the 64 race and was doing quite well until a tire blew up, and then they had to pull the car out because of that. So I'm doing my best to try to make this model look nice. So the title is So Very, Very Dumb, because I'm going to be showing you a thing that I did that was really dumb. And now I have to spend time undoing it. Actually, the parts in question. This is a picture of the real car. Okay, this is a picture of the real car. Back here, if you can see it, there's a green cover. And that green cover goes over velocity stacks, or the venturi tubes, really, that move the air rapidly into the engine. You can see on this picture back here, those covers. Okay. Well, those covers have been a continual mess, and I'll talk about them when I get to them, because they were difficult to work with to begin with, and then I thought I was doing fine, and then I messed them up, and then I messed them up, and now it's still another mess. And yeah, it's being that kind of thing. So I'm muttering about what I'll be talking about later. What I wanted to show you first is this is the real car, okay, and this is the model. And you can see they're pretty similar. They're green with a yellow stripe, right? They've got 4 wheels and all of that, and a number 82. But the model has some differences that are significant. One is, you can see the exhaust on the model is chrome plated, and the exhaust on the real car is yellow. Okay. The seat, I have no idea where they got this idea from. The seat is black with a yellow stripe, but the real seat was red with these black bolsters on either side of the head. Okay. So the model, this model, is totally wrong. But on the model, weirdly, behind this, okay, this part of the car, behind that is actually molded like that. Okay. The designers actually got it correct, and then they put a seat in that didn't fit. So I've been working on modifying the seat so that the historically correct configuration of the seat shows. It's not perfect, but it's way better than that. And then you can see that, this is Lotus powered by Ford, but the real car doesn't have that at all. It has just a little Lotus logo. The decals on the side, the sponsor decals, you can't see them here, but they're very different on the 65 car. So I think what happened is they took the 64 car and made a model of that, and then they made a model, and then they modified it somewhat to make the 65 car. The other thing about this is that the velocity stacks are sticking out here, okay? And on the real car, they're covered by these covers. So I'm, amongst all of the other stuff I'm doing, I'm changing these things, okay, modifying the kit, or painting it differently, or using a different decal set, and painting the stripe instead of using the decal stripe. All of that kind of stuff to try to make the model more historically accurate. This has been taking I have to say, been taking a long time to do because the kit itself is from the 1970s. It's a 1970s reissue of a 1960s kit. And it's been really quite hard to work with. When I built the original kit back in the 1960s, it took a weekend. Now it's taking a long time. Okay, well, what have we got here? I've got a piece of sprue that I have primed and then painted yellow. And the reason I painted this yellow is because I'll show it to you. This is the rear, this goes on the back of the car. And there's a yellow stripe that runs down the car. And I tested it, and I've talked about this before. If I painted this green and then put the yellow over it, the yellow is translucent and it doesn't cover the green. So I'm painting everything yellow, the whole thing yellow, because the green will cover the yellow, but I want it too is somewhat translucent. So if I didn't paint the whole thing yellow, the parts that weren't painted yellow would look different than the parts that were. So this is the first thing I'm going to work with to actually do something more than just test it. And I'm waiting for 1/4-inch tape, okay, for me to paint the stripe. The stripe is 1/4 inch wide. I know that because I measured the decal and the model and parts of the model where the stripe goes. So I'm waiting for the 1/4-inch tape to show up, and that won't show up till Wednesday. And it's going to be 2 weeks before I get around to doing this. I'm going to be gone next week, so I won't be doing any modeling next week at all. So when the tape shows up on Wednesday, and then I should explain that Friday is July 4th, which is a big holiday here in the United States. And I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to stream or not. I know a lot of people who catch this are not from the U.S., so they could care less about our, War of Independence kind of thing. They don't care about that. It's not a big deal for them because it's not their holiday. But in the U.S. it is. And so I'm not sure. I'll decide on Wednesday whether I'm going to stream on Friday. A lot of that will depend on how things go today and whether I've got stuff to do on Friday or not. If the tape shows up on Wednesday, I can put a piece of tape on this, but that's not going to take 3 hours. It'll take way longer than it should because I'll probably mess up. But the reason I've got this to come full circle is I want to test the tape to make sure that if I put tape on the yellow paint and then paint it green, okay, and then take the tape off, it doesn't lift the tape, it doesn't lift the paint off, right? I mean, that would be bad. It would be bad if I taped where I want the stripes so it covered it up and then painted green on everything else, and then took the tape off and expected to see a beautiful, clean-edged yellow stripe. And what I saw instead was the tape pulling the paint away from the plastic. So I'm going to test it on this. That's why I've got this. Okay, I'm going to take this box. This box has in-process stuff. And I'm going to work on some of these things today, probably, depending on how the rest of this goes. I can show you the thing about the seat, okay? You saw that this is, if you look at, I don't know, where's the camera? So on the very back of this, instead of on the seat, they actually molded in those parts that were red and black on either side. Okay, that's correctly done. This is not correct. That should be round, but I decided against trying to sand that down because another part fits on there. And if I made that round, then the other part, this part, okay, this part has to fit on here. And if I sanded it round, then it would have a gap. on there. So what I did is, instead of having the seat up in front of this, I cut off the top of the seat, just mangled it, right? And thinned off this piece of plastic in the back. It's about half as thick as it was before. I could make it thinner. It would be good to make it thinner, but I don't want to break it. So what's going to happen is the seat is cemented onto the back here like that. And there's a little bit of a ridge then. But if I paint this the way it should be painted, then it will look like it should look, or close. It'll look a lot closer to the way it should look on the real car than it would if I did what they said to do with the piece. Yeah. So these are the mirrors. Okay. These were a problem because they were injection molded and the front of the mirror had divots in them. So I put filler in that and I primed it. And usually after priming, I find problems with the plastic, like there's a seam line that didn't show before I primed it. Because these are chrome plated, you can't see it because I've gotten rid of almost all the chrome plating on the model. Because the parts were chrome plated, it was really hard to see any imperfections. All I saw was glare. So I'm going to check these out. I know that I need to modify them a little bit there, and I'll show that to you in a little while. So among the things I could be working on today, while I'm waiting for the tape to show up so I can test painting the stripe, is I've got the velocity tubes. Each one is on a clip. I'm going to put a second coat of aluminum paint on each one of those. Okay. I need to make the little Firestone logos on all of these tires white. Attempt to use a piece of chalk to get the stripe yellow. I'm going to try that. Maybe I'll get to that today, maybe not, depending on how things go. Oh yeah, I wanted to put this in here so it's out of the way and not being a disaster in the meantime. And then this is a box of tiny parts. Fuel filler covers, support bars, ignition thing. Velocity tubes are going to go in here when they're done. These are going to go in here when they're done. Yeah. So these are gone kind of okay. This needs a little bit of work. I'm just going to do that first and show you what's going on with them, because they're going to need a little spritz of primer. And then I'm going to move on to I can't believe I did that mess of, it's the covers on the velocity stacks. They've been one disaster after the other. They started out okay. Okay, I'll say that. There were these ugly chrome-plated things. I cemented them together. I sanded off the chrome plating. The seam disappeared after I primed it. They were looking really good. Then I painted them green, and the paint just didn't work. Okay, it didn't. I don't know because it's an old can of paint or what. So I'll talk about it when it comes time to do that. So I'm going to take one of these off and show it to you. So this is the front of the mirror. I filled in the gap. This is where it attaches. Yeah. This tiny little tab here is where it attaches to the car. Okay. And on the other side is where it attached to the sprue. And there's a little bulge I thought that I had taken off a little bulge of plastic there, but there's a rim around the mirror in the back, and the little bulge of plastic isn't completely off. Okay, I did not succeed in sanding it off completely when I was working on this before I sprayed it. And so I need to finish the job. And okay, I need to work in the box. I almost screwed that up too. Why do I need to work in the box? Because these are slippery little round pieces of plastic, and it's really easy to drop them. And if I drop them, I could drop them on the floor. So I don't know if you can see it, but it's a very obvious lump of plastic there. This side is where it attaches. I want to keep that. But this very obvious lump of plastic is on the outside of the mirror where it's most visible. To make it become invisible by making it go away. Most difficult part is that it bulges down past the edge of where the rim is. I'm using very fine sandpaper. I'm really tempted to use a file because I would do and it'd be done. But if I did too hard, then it would be irreparable. So I'm using this fine polishing sandpaper to try to shape it so the flaw doesn't show. And I'm going to, when I'm done with this, I'm going to reprime these because the priming didn't adhere to the doesn't adhere to the chrome plating very well. Yeah. So when I say that when I built this kit the very first time when it first came out in the 1960s and it took over just over a weekend, right? That's all it was. I didn't do this kind of thing. You know, it was I cut it off the sprue with a single-edged razor blade, and it was just a messy mess. But I was like 13 years old or something, and 65, 4. No, I must have been 14 or 15. I'm almost old enough to be a good modeler, but I wasn't. It was just something to do over a weekend because the weather was bad or something. I don't know. Really, I'm going to have to put my head magnifiers on to see this. I know it's almost invisible, the thing I'm messing with. Okay. I mean, it really is almost invisible, but it's in a highly visible part of the car, right on the outside of the mirror, right on the top. Like right there. Just right out, right out. Everybody can see it. I'm going to do what I said I wasn't going to do. to be able to get and I'm looking at this, the edge of the rim is slightly rounded. Just can't believe it when they did. The design engineers did a nice job. The production just failed. And so this blob of plastic, this obvious flaw, it's just right here where it is, and just really, really highly visible. And I'm going to reprime this. It's hard to tell. And you can see there's this little slightly green semicircle there. Hi. Thanks for joining in. I appreciate it. And joining in chat. I really like having new people come and watch what I'm doing. I'm doing okay. I'm doing little micro sanding here on the outside of the mirror of one of the mirrors of the Lotus-Ford model, because for whatever reason, this is where it attaches to the car, this prong here. It attached to the sprue on the other side, where it sticks right out in a highly visible way and left a blob of plastic distorting the side of the mirror. So I'm doing tiny little bits of sanding and shaping to try to get rid of that. And that's why I'm wearing head magnifiers, so I can see what I'm doing. But it's hard to tell because it changes color then. So I have to put a little spritz of primer back on there to see if I succeeded. This one isn't quite as bad. Yeah. And you say, why am I doing this? Because I want the model to look good. I'll explain in a little bit why it says Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm building a 1970s vintage kit of a 1960s vintage car. It's because the stream started as a place to paint dungeon tiles and minifigs for a D&D show, because Dice and Dungeons puts on a Dungeons and Dragons show. That's the point of it. And when there weren't any to paint, our DM said, well, keep the stream going. Why not? And I said, I don't know. Do I have anything better to do on Monday, Wednesdays, and Friday mornings? And the answer to that was, well, not really, because I'm old and retired, and if I wasn't doing this, I'd probably be doing something useful around the house, like cleaning up or something. So I'm doing this instead. And so I've been building models like I did 60 years ago. Oh, God, yeah. That happens. Yeah, so the first time I built this kit was when it came out in probably 66 or so. So, yeah, it's almost 60 years ago. Well, I'm not sure how well that came out. Yeah. What you do see on this, you didn't see that I knocked this over. You see this pretty frequently on this stream. What you see pretty frequently on this stream is that I bump into things and knock things over. And I still don't have my oops button. There's a little stream deck over here with buttons on it that, starts the stream and ends the stream. And I've asked for an oops button so that I could reach over and push it whenever something like that happens, like when I knock something over. But I don't have that. Put it on this piece of tape to hold it down so that when I spray it with the spray primer, it doesn't go flying. At least that's the intent. Yeah, and that's been painted over. So that little bit of sanding that I did, I'll probably have to redo after I prime it again, and I see whether I was successful or not. So that the little bitty flaws that you can hardly see without a 2-time magnifier are gone. And I hope it's not in vain. What can happen is that after I do all of that and I paint it 2 different shades of metallic, one for the face of the mirror, right, and one for the body of the mirror. So after I do all of that, then when I cement it onto the body of the car, that's when I can do something like get a blot of cement adhesive, and ruin the detail by having a blot of adhesive. Okay, so I'm actually going to prime these now. I'm going to be off screen for just a little bit while I prime these, because there's a chance then that the primer would dry enough so that if I had managed to get rid of those little bubbles, those little blobs of excess plastic, I can paint these. So I'm going to let you just look at this and wonder what that's all about while I go and put a little paint on it. Okay. Getting out the sandpaper that I'm going to be needing. All these clips, each one of these clips, if you can see it, it's holding a little thing like that. Those are the velocity stacks. Okay. And they just need a second coat of aluminum paint. Now there's the chrome plating I kept talking about. That's the back of it, so it's not chrome plated. These are the parts that are painted more appropriately. Okay. So these are going to go in here. Usually that would be something that I would save for the end of the stream, because usually by the last half hour, I really start losing focus and I start dropping things, and I know it can get, kind of fun for somebody watching for me to be fumbling with stuff, but it's not fun. And I mean, painting those would be something that I could do without a very big risk of having something go wrong. But on the other hand, if I painted them now, then the paint would dry and I can put them in a box. But no, more first things first. Well, actually, last things first. So this is one of the engine covers. These tubes. Hey, Aman. Thanks for dropping in again. How you doing? I missed you. Yeah, you hadn't joined in earlier or end of last week, so I guess you've been busy. So you can see that this got painted green, and on this side it's shiny and not, and along the top the paint bubbled up, and so it just really got messed up. And the other one did too. There's two of them. Okay. And so what I needed to do, and what I need to do, is I need to take the paint off. So I'm sanding it off. I try to get a solvent to work, and it doesn't. So I'm sanding off the paint. This one I did on Friday. I sanded it off, and as I was sanding it, what I managed to do was I broke the two parts in half. Okay, I just broke them in half, and it had to be re-cemented. And then I got the cement all over the top of it, and it's just really a mess. And now I need to clean this up and sand it all down smooth again. I've almost destroyed these parts. Oh yeah, okay. I thought you were back last week, but you were still out and about. Cool. So the two parts came apart, and I re-cemented them, and now they all need to be sanded down. I need to make the seam go away. But the thing here, it says, oh no, very, very dumb. Okay. So this is my clever idea. I think you mentioned that last week, that you had a problem getting the train ticket, that your friend was going to get you the train ticket, but didn't, I guess, or, didn't get it right. Oh, so yeah. So I said to myself, I need to paint this all around so I can put it on a stick like this. And then I can rotate it, put a glove on and rotate it and paint it all over in one go. And I said to myself, well, yeah, that's pretty clever. I could put a stick in there. Okay. And I'm going to hold it on with sticky tack. It's sort of a blue gooey thing like this. Okay. And it sticks to almost anything. And I thought, well, I'll put a little bit on the end of a stick, and put it in there. Okay. And it'll hold, and it did. Okay. So that was me being pretty clever about that. And so you probably heard me talk about that, about, oh, I can put that in. And I don't have to worry about the sticky tack because it's not going to show because this goes onto something. But what you probably didn't hear me say is, but won't that get in the way of these when you cover them? Won't the sticky tack get in the way? That's too bad. So yeah, I didn't say that, but the sticky tack does get in the way. And so you can see it in there. Okay. You can see it in there, and that all has to come out. So I need to somehow scrape that out, and I'm going to scrape it out before I bother sanding this down, because in the process of scraping it out, I might just break this open again. Oh, okay. So you weren't able to be as active as you were hoping to be. And I hope they didn't mess this up too much. So I'm going to be spending most of the stream today sanding the paint off of this so that it looks more like this. Okay, that's the raw plastic with just a little bit of the chrome plating still showing. I'll probably clean that off before I'm done. But I need to clean the sticky tack out of this one, completely get it out of there. And oh yeah, she wanted people to be able to walk around. It was too bad, but the barbecue was good. Did you grill, like burgers and sausages and things? This is going to work. This is a needle file. This will do a good job of scraping this ticky tack off, but I don't know if I'll be able to get it off of the file. I'm going to try the pin. I'm not going to be able to get all of it out because it just sticks to everything. When they say it sticks, they don't. They're not kidding. It sticks. Kind of hoping that I can get this clip in here and pull it out. Use this. So yeah, I mean, it was just really, really dumb putting this blue sticky tack in here. It was just a really stupid thing. And I need to get it out. At least it comes off the needle file. Sausage steak. Oh wow. So that was quite a feast. It sounds really good. Well, I'm going to scrape at this until the blue sticky tack is gone. I still need to hold this on a stick, okay, in order to paint it. so that I can get the paint all around it. But I'm not going to use the blue sticky tack. I'm going to try to use just a piece of the masking tape that I've got. We got to do this to the other one too. So just about everything having to do with these covers has been so it was her birthday and she did the grilling. Is that, I guess that's, I mean, if she wanted to do that for her friends, that's cool. But usually if somebody has a, you know, if it's their day, other people are doing things for them, not the other way around. That was really nice to do a grill like that. Sounds like a lot of food. I bet it was good though. Okay. I got it off of that side. File is working. I mean, it scrapes it up pretty well. And more importantly, it comes off the file. Just so I'm spending, I would say, like 5 or 6 times the amount of time that I should have on these particular parts. Okay. It actually had gone pretty well at the beginning. They cemented together okay. The seams got sanded off okay. The priming went really quite well. But then when I put the green paint on it, everything's just gone to words I can't say on a PG-13 or, you know, a PG rated. I'm trying to keep this, you know, but you can imagine the words that I would like to use. I'll just let you imagine the words that I want to use about how this has gone poorly. And now, before I take on the other one, before I start taking off all the paint on the other one, I'm going to sand this down and hope that I re-cemented it right at the end of the stream. You know, I was frustrated and it broke apart, and I thought, well, let me clean it up. I didn't clean it up. Let me cement it together, and then I got cement on the outside of it, and that dissolved the plastic a little bit. So I may end up having to sand down quite a bit in order to get the surface smooth again. So this has just been kind of like one mess up after the other. Okay, well, at least I got the blue goo out of there. Need that. I don't need this. And I don't need this anymore until I do the other one. I'll just leave it there. I'm glad you had a good time on your trip and that you got there and back safely. It sounds like your friend put on a really nice meal for everybody. It was really good. Okay. So I'm going to use this. I was using 600 grit to get the paint off. But I'm going to use the polishing, the emery cloth, the polishing emery cloth now, just to see how it goes. No, not yet. 800 grit. Because more needs to come off. And this is for polishing, but the seam, I can feel the seam. Okay. It's like the parts, after I re-cemented it, the parts didn't line up again. They're not in alignment. And so I need to take off a fair amount of plastic here in order to make that work. I was kind of afraid of that. I was doing it in a hurry. It was a mess. I didn't get them perfectly lined up. And as often happens, one thing just leads to another. And in this case, yeah, to sand down the high part until it matches the low part. And then I'll prime it, and then I'll see how I did. The seam is really showing. I don't know what happened there. It's almost like, no, it's just dust, I guess. This part of it right here, this is like it's really visible. This is in the back of the car, actually. Oh, man. I mean, if I can feel it with my fingernail, I know I'll be able to see it. Hey, thanks for joining in. I'm working very diligently. I'm trying to fix a mess that I created last week. I had these parts nicely glued together. They come together, and after they're cemented, sometimes the seam will show where the two parts come together. And I had very successfully gotten rid of the seams and very successfully primed them. And then very unsuccessfully, very, very, very unsuccessfully painted them with the final coat. and I'm having to start from the very, very beginning. Worse than that, I have to take the paint off. I've had to take the paint off completely. And then this, as I was taking the paint off, this particular piece broke in half again. So I had to re-cement it. And the re-cementing didn't go all that well. And I was sanding down the seams again, kind of like I did a week ago. So pretty much what's happened is I've lost an entire week's worth of work on these little bits. And I'm doing that because these particular parts. Oh, thanks for the follow. I really appreciate it. Welcome to Dice and Dungeons. So, yeah, I'm resanding these to get rid of the seams, hopefully. Once again, because when they broke in half as I was taking the paint off, and then I got impatient. And instead of waiting for like today when I'm more relaxed at the very beginning of the stream, I slammed them together at the end of the stream, and the parts didn't line up, and now I've got to sand the seam down again and hopefully not mess up the contour of the whole thing. But yeah, and after I'm done with this one, I've got to start all over with this. All that paint has to come off down to the bare plastic. What I'm hoping, though, is that this time at least, after it's down to the bare plastic, it doesn't split in half again. Not again, but it doesn't split in half like this one did. So I would just as soon not have to try to do all this repair work. Yeah, it would have been better if I hadn't rushed the job and gotten cement on the top. Essentially just made a mess of it. I mean, it was going pretty well, and then I made a mess of it, and then I made a mess of the effort to fix the mess. And yeah, so there it is. Fortunately, the plastic is pretty thick. So I can do all this sanding, and there's still plastic left. This is a problem here. But yeah, the thing that was really... no, it's a vintage model kit. I'll show you the box in just a bit. It was a plastic model kit that was produced in the 1970s. The 1970s kit was actually a reissue of a kit that was originally issued in like 1966. This is a model of the car that won the 1965 Indianapolis 500. And as I keep saying, I'm old enough that I built one of the original kits in the 1960s. I actually did. And so I was not nearly as careful back then as I'm being now in terms of doing things like sanding out the seams and, making the seams invisible, that kind of thing. I just slammed it together over a weekend, and there it was. But I'll show you the model in just a minute. I just want to finish this if I can. To get the bottom too, I forgot about that under here. So these old model kits are injection molded. Here, I'll show you the box. Yeah, actually, the kit is a collector's item. I'll tell the story about that. So the original kit, you don't see the ones from the 60s anymore at all, but you can still find these. Which are the 1970s reissues. So you can see the box is in really good shape. I bought this like 7 or 8 years ago or something, quite a while ago. And it was, it still had the original cellophane wrapping on it. And I decided I was going to build this kit next, but then I looked on eBay. I said, what are these kits going for now? And one of these kits, like this with the original cellophane on it, was $50, $50. And I didn't pay anywhere near that for this, 7 or 8 years ago. Probably paid like 18 or something. But yeah, it was a collector's item, and I ruined it. It was, do I sell this to a collector, resell it, or do I build the kit? And I asked, for some opinions, and in general, it was, go ahead and just build a model. What good is it if you just put it on a shelf, right? And so it was, I got the X-Acto knife out and I split the cellophane, and it was, there goes $50, just like that. But yeah, anyway, but it's, for me, it's a nostalgia thing to be rebuilding the model that I built when I was, in my mid-teens, which is when I would have built the original one. So yeah, they are collector's items, but this one isn't anymore because it's, been opened and being built. So I have destroyed the collector value of this in return for just having the the experience of building the model. So I guess that's okay. But it was just like, okay, as soon as I slice off the cellophane, boom, more than half of the value is just immediately disappeared, just like that. Poof. So I probably should show everybody some of the dungeon tiles that we've produced, and maybe some of the minifigs. I'll do that a little bit later. Because Dyson Dungeons puts on a Dungeons and Dragons show, and this stream started as the place where the dungeon tiles and minifigs of the show got painted, and then we had enough, had all the dungeon tiles and minifigs we needed, at least at that point. And so our DM said, well, you got to do something to stay out of our hair on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings. So why don't you build some of your old models? So I did. I built another vintage model not too long ago. Well, thank you for that. That's actually really true. Is that, I'm collecting it. I've collected it and I'm building it. And, I have to say that redoing stuff that I messed up because I wasn't careful, that part is so much fun. But, this isn't I'm not a master modeler doing this is how you model. So I'm an old guy, kind of sometimes figuring it out as I go myself. But I frequently, if you're watching this and you want to build models, you can actually pick up some tips from me sometimes I get it right. Sometimes I get a clever idea, or I know what I'm doing and I can show you. And sometimes, like this, in this particular instance, it's just don't do what I did. Okay, don't do what I did. This is a how not to show at them. Sometimes there is definitely a how not to aspect to this. And in this particular case, where I am now doing everything over again, when I'm, starting all over again, basically I'm taking this back to the way it was more than a week ago because of, don't do this. I really don't know how the green paint messed up. I don't know what happened with it because I'd used it before and it was fine. I painted the bottom part of the car with the same can of the same green paint. But this time when I used it, it didn't come out even. It just didn't. And it just, because these are highly visible parts on the model, I mean, they're right there in the front. Well, in the back, actually. They're right there in the back, but in a place where everybody can see them. Yeah. So when the finished coating of the paint failed, this whole thing is just a sad mess. But oh yeah, I can help with that if you're doing minifigs. Okay. Um, yeah, the primers. There's lots of different primers. I would recommend that you use a good brand name. The two a good brand name primer paint. We use, I'm not advertising these, but I'll just show you what I've been using because it works pretty well. Is this? It's called Vallejo. It's made in Spain. Hobby paint, and you can get it in a pretty big can. The bigger the can you get, the cheaper it is by volume. I mean, the smaller ones are less expensive, but there's way less paint in it. And this stuff works pretty well. You can get it in white, which is what I usually use because it makes the coats, it makes it look brighter. Okay. And you can get it in a spray can like this, so you don't need to invest in an airbrush, at least not right away. And if you're doing minifigs, it's all brush painting anyway, little detail painting. So this is pretty good. On the other hand, you can, and we've used this too, believe it or not, okay, on dungeon tiles, when there's a high volume, not just if you're doing a minifig, okay, I would say invest in this. The Tamiya, which is a Japanese manufacturer, they also make a pretty good primer, and they're made for plastic models. They're made for rosin, for plastic, and it adheres pretty well, and it covers pretty well. It levels really nicely. Okay, so there's that. When we do our dungeon tiles, okay, like these, okay, and we might have like two or three dozen of these things, just a whole lot of them. Okay, you can actually just buy like Rust-Oleum. Okay, it says bonds to plastic. You just have to make sure it'll bond to plastic. You get a whole lot more of it for the money. It's a little bit rougher coat. Okay, it's not as smooth as this. But yeah, I would say get like a Vallejo or a Tamiya, buy the primer, make sure you get the primer, okay, and get a spray can. It dries really fast. You can do, like, if you wanted to do a second coat, or if you needed to do a touch up of the primer or something, you can do that within maybe 2 hours. But before you actually start painting, I'd say before you start painting with it, I would let it go for at least 24 hours before you paint over it, just to be sure that it's cured. You can buy brush-on primer, and that's okay. There's no reason not to. But I found that the spray can just coats it more evenly, and a nice even coating of primer is good. So let me just show you these, just because I've got them here. These are some minifigs. I'll show you some minifigs I painted a while ago. Okay. Yep, 24 hours. Well, the brush on will work okay. You just need to make sure you get it on as evenly as you can, and make sure you cover it all. These were painted over the white primer that I just showed you. Okay, and the thing about the white primer is that it doesn't dull down the paint, and you can use speed paints over it if you do that. But like for this big guy here, I used the gray primer that I showed you, the less expensive primer, and you can see it covered pretty well. Okay. And I did that because I wanted a darker undercoat underneath what I was painting. Just give it a darker colored look. But if you're doing like lighter colors, like these tans or these, especially the metallics, I would highly recommend using a white primer. So, yeah. And then if you're painting minifigs, if you're probably using acrylics, I'm sure you're probably using acrylics paints. You just want to make sure that you let it dry for at least an hour before you put a second coat on, or if you are painting adjacent areas, one color right next to the other. Yeah, the Viejo is a good brand. The thing I like about it is it comes in these little tubes, these things, instead of a jar, and they have a huge range. Okay, and the thing about these is that you just squeeze out what you need. And with minifigs, you're usually squeezing out just like a couple little drops of paint. And it doesn't dry out in the bottle. When we're painting dungeon tiles, and we're doing a lot of them, okay, a huge volume, I bought jars of paint, the big jars, because we would just go through a lot of paint, and it's cheaper per volume to buy large jars of paint than it is to buy, the little tubes. Well, I think this might be okay. Getting close anyway. And then I'll find out. After these are reprimed, then I will find out if I was able to once again get rid of the seams like I did the first time. I was very, very happy with the results the first time around. Wow, those seams are gone. It looks really good. And then the paint failed. But the acrylics are really good because they clean up easily, okay, and they dry quickly, so you can recoat or paint one, paint something and then touch it up. There's always the touch up. You can go back over it with the touch up color fairly quickly. You don't have to wait 2 days between coats, that kind of thing. It's more or less sanded down to where it needs to be. I'm just going to polish it all with this. After I prime this again and I see how the seams are, sometimes I might need to sand them down again a little bit, or if there's a gap. What's going on here? Yeah, there's a little gap that needs to be filled in right there on the end. I could feel it with my thumbnail. I'm going to put some filler on that and let it dry, and then that'll have to be sanded before it's primed. And I really would like to get these little bits of chrome off of that if I could, because those will end up showing. Oh, you're quite welcome, and good luck with the minifig painting. It's really kind of fun. Oh, I'll tell you one more thing. If you're painting minifigs, I don't know how good your eyesight is, okay? But if you want to invest in something, if you've got some extra money to invest, is things like this. It's called a head magnifier. Really, it's like glasses. You put these on, but instead of a lens right in front of you, it's got these magnifiers that hang off the front, and a little bit of a supplemental light, like an LED light. And I find that for the fine detail painting, these were really, really worth the investment, because I can put them on and they look terrific, right? And then adjust the lenses, and I can see what I'm working on. So it's just a thought that if you did want to, yeah, this it's really hard to imagine, but those tiny little LED lights, just focusing the light right on the work surface, that really makes a big difference, at least for me, with ancient eyes. And the particular one that I bought has had a variety of lenses, all the way from like 1.5 to 3 times. I use 2x. That's what I found to be most comfortable for me. But yeah, it has like 5 different levels, and that's nice to have too. Okay. What I need to do here, because there's a tiny little bit of a gap here where it didn't close, is I've got this filler. I've got like 4 different kinds of plastic fillers that I use for different things. But this particular one is really good for teeny tiny little cracks. Okay. I've got this other stuff called green putty, which is easier to work with. Okay. And it dries more quickly. This is going to take a while. But for little bitty little cracks, this stuff works really well because it's just more liquid. It's just better. Okay. So this one is fixed as well as I can get it, and I reprime it and then see if I got rid of the seams or not. Whether I need to do filling and sanding yet on it, or whether it's back to where it was a week ago. Yeah, I need to put some on here too, just on the end of the other side. I just saw that and felt it. Oh yeah, I should do that. I've got a nice mug of coffee here. I used this particular filler with pretty good success on the mirrors. It filled in the divot and gave it a nice kind of convex surface. Okay. Well, I'm going to be spending now a long time I need to take all the paint off of this, and why not? I'm going to go ahead and get the sticky tack out of here. Guess we'll do this right away. One of the many errors that I have made on these particular pieces. I'm kind of hoping that this one doesn't break in half, because that set things back quite a lot, re-cementing them, and it might end up not looking as good as it did the first time around, which would be unfortunate. But I'll just, keep at it until it looks okay. This was a compromise. Oh, yes, it is. And thanks so much. I really appreciate the new subscription. Thanks so very, very much. So I was saying, I'm going, just to let everybody know again, I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, I am going to be traveling next week, taking a little bit of a vacation. And you might say, well, you're retired. Every day is a vacation. That's kind of true. It is kind of true. I don't have a job I have to go to, so every day is kind of like a vacation. But this is a traveling to another place kind of vacation. So I won't be streaming next week. I will definitely be streaming Wednesday, but here in the States, Friday is July 4th, which is a big national holiday. But I think I might go ahead and stream anyway, because we're not going out and doing anything during the day. So why not celebrate the national holiday by just doing this instead, or as part of scraping this. This was such a stupid mistake. I wanted to paint this in one fell go, so I put it on this stick. Oh, go ahead, please. Oh, no, don't. You don't need to sand them. In fact, after putting on the primer, I have really very, very rarely sanded them, and I don't sand them ahead of time. Well, I'm sanding these because, there are two parts that were cemented together, right? And they had a seam, and after it was cemented together, I wanted the seam to not show, so I sanded that down. But no, you usually don't have to. With minifigs, no. But I will say this: depending on where you got your minifigs, like if you 3D printed them yourself, or even if you bought them commercially before you started painting them, what you're going to find sometimes is that there are little bits of like excess plastic or metal. There's just little bits that shouldn't be there. Like you'll have a sword, and on the sword, you go along the edge of it and there's a bump, okay? Or underneath the arm, there might be like a little filament of plastic or metal that kind of fills a gap that should be open. And so you do want to get rid of those before you prime it. So what I'd recommend is, getting some good sandpaper, fine sandpaper, like 600, 800 grit. Okay. I'm using 600 to take the paint off because I don't want to scratch it all up. But if you go much under like 400 grit, you're going to scratch the surface and it won't be shiny anymore. It won't be polished. So I'd recommend getting something like a 600 grit to do some rough, and then get like 1,000 or 1,200 grit for polishing out where you had sanded. Okay. But yeah, check your minifig carefully before you prime it, to make sure that there aren't like little bits of excess stuff just attached, where you need to clean it off. Because I've had to do that on almost every one I've ever done. So I'm using 600 grit to take the paint off, and then after that I polish it with 1,000 grit. The 600 grit, it doesn't work as fast as I would like. Okay, you're going to see I'm spending a lot of time sanding at this and rubbing away at it to get the paint off. But that's a real compromise then too. Oh yeah. If it's something like that, a larger figure, sand it first to make sure it's smooth, preparing the surface like I did with this, okay, for the third time. Prepared the surface by sanding it smooth, making sure the seams are filled, then polishing it, okay, and then priming. That sequence of things works really well. The other thing you're going to find, and you'll find it a little bit frustrating, is that after you prime things, sometimes you see flaws that you couldn't see before. That's really been a significant issue with this particular model. Yeah, I haven't showed that to you, but let me just show you what I'm dealing with. Okay. Parts on this model came chrome plated. Okay. And the chrome plating, I mean, it's nice and shiny and all, but the chrome plating isn't always very even. And so it makes for a rough surface. The cement doesn't adhere to it without dissolving it. Okay. And it's historically wrong. So just all of that. But the other thing is that and I found this, I just found it at the beginning of the stream earlier, is that it's so shiny, you can't see if there's a flaw or not. All I get was glare. Okay. And so what I ended up finding is that after I primed and everything was nice and flat white, is I saw that there were flaws that needed to be sanded out. And I did that, and I reprimed them. But you just need to be prepared for that, is try to get the surfaces prepared as well as you can. You know, get rid of any flaws in the plastic, that kind of thing. Definitely do that, and then prime them. But be prepared to re-examine them after you prime them, because sometimes then you can see things you couldn't see before. And I would recommend, if you've got a place to use spray paint, that that you get a can of spray primer, because it just, you know, it goes faster and it covers more evenly than a brush on. There's nothing wrong with brushing it on, but the spray just for me at least, it just works better. It just works. It's more even, and 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 then be careful not to miss spots. I have to say that. The other thing when you're painting anything, minifigs or whatever, is always keep rotating your work, looking at it from all different angles. I can't tell you how many times I have painted something either with like a primer or a base coat, or even with the detail level of painting, and then I turn it around like 90 degrees, right? And I find that I missed the spot. Just like completely missed it. So it's as you're painting, just keep moving it around, keep rotating it, and looking especially for, you know, spots with a different color or a different reflectivity, because it is possible to completely miss a spot. It's kind of weird, but it happens. What I'm doing today should have been completely unnecessary, but the final coat of the green paint just didn't work. You know, it just came out uneven, both in terms of texture and in reflective and gloss. And I didn't. What would have been nice is if there was a solvent that would have taken this paint off without marring the plastic. But if I hadn't used the spray paint, if I'd used the brush on acrylics, isopropyl alcohol would have taken it off without marring the plastic underneath. But the spray paint is a different formulation. It's not an acrylic. And isopropyl didn't work on that. Lacquer thinner worked, but the lacquer thinner also melted the plastic. So that wasn't a good idea. So I have to sand it off. And I'm using a finer grit sandpaper than I probably need to. I probably could be using 400 on this. But if you're going to sand something, there's some other thoughts about sanding, is it's always a compromise between how quickly you sand, and how much polishing needs to be done to get rid of the sanding marks. So what you're going to find is if you use a 400 grit sandpaper on something soft, like a piece of plastic like this, okay, it's going to leave a rough surface. It just will. And then you need to use a finer grade sandpaper to polish out the scratch marks from the coarser sandpaper. And so what I mean by a compromise is that you might start with a coarser grade of sandpaper, like for removing this paint, for example. I could be using 400 instead of 600 on this. Probably could even be using like 200 or 150. And it would be taking it off a whole lot faster, but then I would end up spending time polishing out the scratch marks from the coarse sandpaper. And then it's a question, did I save any time? Okay. If I'm using the 600, I have less polishing to do. So which is more efficient? In this case, I decided to use the 600, and it's taking a long time, especially here. The paint seems to have built up. But, what else do I have to do with my time other than sit around trying to fix things that I messed up the first time? It's not the first time I've had to fix things I've messed up the first time. So I can't give you any advice, in terms of how to have prevented what happened here. I really don't know what happened. Well, I shouldn't say that. I know what part of what happened is you can still see little remnants of the chrome plating. So if you look on this side, see it's like kind of a eggshell finish here, and then it's glossy underneath. I had taken off all the chrome plating up here, but not down here. So the chrome plating underneath it made it shinier. It shouldn't have, but it did. And so that explains the kind of inconsistency of gloss on the model. But I really don't know why it bubbled up on me. It's like I said, I've used the same can of paint before, and it didn't do that. So this time around, I'm taking all the paint off, but I'm also getting the chrome off of it as much as I can, right down to the base. So that I can get rid of that inconsistency, as it were, of gloss. Right at the base there, I'm going to do what I said I wasn't going to do, but right along the base, it's really hard to get the sandpaper in there. Just using the file. A little bit right along the edge here. Okay, that one's dead. Get some more. No, it's the other way. In terms of abrasiveness, the lower the number, the more abrasive it is. So like a 150 grit is way more abrasive than a 600. And you can get all the way to like 2000, which is really, really fine. So the higher the number, I know it's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? The higher the number, the finer the grit. So if if you're going to invest in tools other than paints and brushes, and make sure you get really good brushes, I would recommend. I don't know what you've got, but I use 10-0 and 20-0. It's the numbers on the brushes for most of the really fine detail work. I found that sable works really well. So, but in terms of more expensive investments, the head magnifiers for sure. I would really suggest getting those with multiple levels of magnification, and get a light. Make sure it's got a little light on it, because that light makes a big difference, at least for me, in terms of being able to see what you're working on. And then good, you can buy these needle files. Yes, the higher the number, the more gentle it is. Exactly. And usually needle files, you don't want it, they will definitely leave scratch marks, okay? But sometimes you need to smooth out an edge, or you need to get in somewhere and pull out a little bit of a string of plastic or something. And the needle files work really well. Get them as fine as you can, okay? Want them to be, not leave scratch marks if you can avoid it. But those are I found those kind of a handy thing to have. There are other things you need to experiment with and decide what works best for you. Like when you're painting one color up against another color, right? The edges. So just some suggestions with that when you're painting edges of one paint against another is sometimes it's more important to have a nice clean edge, a nice straight line. Sometimes it's more important in terms of looks to have a really nice straight line than it is for the nice straight line to be in exactly the right place. I mean, you want the nice straight line to be in exactly the right place, but if you can't do that, and sometimes you just can't do what you'd want to be able to do, either because you can't reach it, or you don't have the right tools, or in my case, you don't have the eye-hand coordination that one would like to have. So a nice straight line between one color and the other is more important than the location of it. The other is that you're going to find that you're not always going to get a nice straight line in the location where you want it. Okay, you're just not going to the first time, and so you're going to need to do a touch-up. And you want to make sure the paint is dry before you do the touch-up, because if the paint isn't dry when you do the touch-up, then they're going to bleed into each other, and you'll just have to do more and more repainting. So I'd let the paint. Usually it's with acrylics. Seriously, it's dry enough within like half an hour. But just to be safe, I'd recommend that you give it an hour. Then one thing you're going to find is, and you'll have to decide how to do this on your own, because everybody seems to have a different preference, is that on minifigs you'll have these raised surfaces, right? Like there'll be a piece of armor, or that will come up to a highlight, a detail, and you might have like raised rivets or something. Okay, some people prefer to paint the lower level first, okay, and then paint the upper part. They just find it easier to bring the brush, to touch the upper part lightly with the brush and get that detail done. Some other people prefer it the other way. They like to paint the upper surface and then push the paint on the lower surface up to the edges of the raised part. If you can follow what I'm saying. I find I get better results personally painting the raised bits, the raised detail first, and then painting the lower part and pushing the paint up to the edges. Sometimes you just can't do that. Actually, I have to say I end up going both directions. It kind of depends on what I'm painting and the colors. And oh yeah, get the head magnifiers. They really will help. Once you figure out the adjusted. Oh, if the primer is peeling. If the primer is peeling, it means it's not adhering to the surface underneath. So there could be a couple of reasons for that. One is, the most likely is that the surface underneath wasn't clean. Yeah, I mean, dust could, if there is dust under there, it's going to adhere to the dust and not to the surface. The other thing, you don't really think about this very much, but is your hands, when you leave fingerprints, you've got oils and stuff on your hands. And what might be happening is that the surface is like got an oil on it. And it might even be from the manufacturer of it. So if you've got like rubbing alcohol, I mean, you could do, you want to wash it before you prime it, I guess, is what I'm saying. You don't always have to do this, but if you've got peeling primer, it means that it's not sticking to the surface. And one reason for that might not always be this, but one reason for that might be that the surface is dirty, and you can actually just wash it with soap and water, okay, and rinse it really, really well. Make sure all the soap is off of it. The other is use rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, which is pretty safe, and it's a good cleaner. It cleans oils off really well. And is just wash it down with that, with a clean cloth. Just wipe it all off as much as you can. I usually do that. I'll use rubbing alcohol because it doesn't leave any residue. It evaporates once you're done with it. So I would try that first. The other possibility might be that your primer just isn't going to stick to whatever it is you're priming. So if you're painting it on plastic or metal, it just might not be adhering. So make sure you've got a really clean surface. Okay, that's the first thing, is make sure the surface is clean. And if it's clean and it's still not adhering, then you might need to get a different kind of primer. Another possibility, I'm just trying to think of all the possibilities. You know, first of all, make sure the surface is clean. Second, make sure that the primer you have is actually going to adhere to whatever it is you're priming. Okay. Like if you're priming plastic, you want to make sure you're using a primer that, you know, says bonds to plastic. Another possibility, okay, as you work your way through this, try to figure out what it was and what it isn't, is that it was on too thick. That it was on, you know, that it was, there's too much paint put on. And if it is put on too thick, then it takes longer to cure. And sometimes it just, you know, it'll just come off because there's too much of it. What you'll usually get, though, if there's too much paint, is you'll get like an alligator surface. It won't be smooth and even. It'll be like bubbly or crackly. So I'm not sure. But if it's peeling off, yeah, I would try first of all to make sure that the surface was clean. And if you're absolutely sure it's clean, make sure that the primer is designed, well, do it in either, you can do both of those at the same time, right? Make sure that the primer is designed for the surface that you're painting. I found that, you know, again, not that I'm advertising Viejo, but I've just found that the Viejo primer spray paint bonds to plastic a little bit better than it bonds to metal. And the stupid chrome plating on this model, just hardly anything sticks to it reliably. The white primer, you know, grabs on pretty well, but I've had to do some touching up several times where it flaked off. The other thing you can do, well, I don't know, if it's a big flat surface, you know, if it's like a minifig and you just detail, then you probably just have an issue of surface preparation. Sometimes if a surface is really glossy, like these bits that have chrome plating on them, it's not going to adhere. That's true of anything. Like if you're painting over gloss, like if you're painting over a glossy surface, like on a wall, I mean, just not talk about wall paint. So if you're painting on a wall surface, glossy paint won't hold more paint. It doesn't stick because of the gloss nature. So if the surface you're painting is really shiny, and it's especially true like on larger flat surfaces, on the edge of a sword or something, you might take out your, 1200 grit sandpaper, your really fine sandpaper, and just rub it a little bit. And what it does is it removes the gloss. And see, like this is really shiny here. If I were to paint over that, except for maybe using the same paint, it probably wouldn't stick. So I know that, people who paint walls, for example, will say if you're painting over a glossy paint, that you need to degloss it, either by giving it a light sanding or by buying this material that it sort of etches the surface a little bit. So those are the reasons I can think of peeling. Most of them don't have to do with the curing time. They have to do with what's underneath the paint. So I'm thinking, what I might have done on this is I might have, I probably got impatient, okay? And with spray paint like this, the advice always is a couple of thin coats is better than a thick coat, because putting too much paint, and that was one of the things, I'd mentioned, too much paint, it doesn't level, and you end up with blobs and alligatoring and things like that. A marred surface. But I found a good layer of primer makes it, it just makes a big difference. These acrylic paints are formulated so they adhere to the primer pretty well, but they don't always adhere to the raw surface itself. Okay, so the main reason for the primer is to form a surface to which the final coat will adhere and be nice and level and smooth. As you can tell, today I'm spending almost the entire stream doing nothing but fixing a mess up that happened earlier. And sometimes that's just, as I'm working on these models, sometimes that just happens, is it just doesn't work, And fortunately, it is fortunate that it's possible to remove the paint and get down to the original surface. In this case, I had too much paint on here. I can just tell as I'm sanding this that I got impatient and tried to cover it all in one thick coat. Yeah, and I needed to have taken all of the chrome plating off in order to provide for a consistent and uniform surface for the paint to begin with. Yeah, this is like one of those ounce of prevention kinds of things. Take your time, do it slowly, do it right, and then you don't end up having to spend way more time fixing it later on. So, as I frequently say on this stream, to the extent that this is a how-to show at all, how to make models good, to the extent that that's true at all, it's frequently through, don't just do this. What I did, don't do that. And here's why. In this case, the only thing I can think of is that, there's two things that's come to mind as to why this didn't work. Why the coat of green paint on this ended up being a problem. One is that it's old paint. It is. It's like 6 or 7 years old, and so it just might not be good. It didn't level well, and it didn't gloss. The surface didn't gloss the way it was supposed to. So it might be old paint, or it might be that I got impatient and tried to do in one coat what I should have done in two. And it could have just been a combination of that. It just could be that I got impatient using old paint, and that the combination resulted in failure. That could be as well. Regardless, the result is the same, which is that it all needed to be taken down back to the original bare plastic and started over, which is what I'm doing. What time is it getting to be? I can't see. There they are. Oh, almost noon. Okay. So it looks like I'll have time to finish cleaning this up. It's still, I have to get this underneath here, which is not an easy thing to do, as well as along the edges. So it's not quick. The last bits are not fast. But I should be able to finish this and then put the second coat of paint on the velocity stacks yet today. And then I'll take a look. I have to remember that I stuck the mirrors over there that needed to be reprimed after I fixed, hopefully, cleaned up where the sprue was attached. Let's see how successful that was in a little bit. But I want to get this, I really want to get this done so that I can reprime them. I'd like to be able to do that. I'd like to reprime them tomorrow, either later today or tomorrow, so that on Wednesday I can take a look at them and see if they need additional surface prep. You know, whether there needs to be more sanding done or not. Get the chrome down. Chrome plating kind of builds up at the bottom here, and it's really difficult to get off. Yeah, I didn't want to have to use a file on that, but I did. Need to sand this down to make sure it's not all scratchy. Yeah, so I'm ending up taking 2 hours of time. 2 hours of time to basically completely redo the work that I had done a week ago. Yay, hooray. Well, at least this one didn't break in half. At least not yet. Not yet, I should say. At this point in time, it is not yet broken. And I'm just starting to get a little impatient, which is not good. Yeah, this paint is really thick under here. The other thing, this is a tendency I have, and I would recommend against it. Okay. If you're going to be building models, you can usually anticipate the parts that are going to be the hardest to do. Like painting a place that you can barely reach. Okay. Or in this case, sanding off paint on what is a multiply curved surface, right? Which is harder than if it were just a straight smooth surface like the top of this was. For some reason, more often than not, way more often than I'd like it to be, is I do the hardest part last when I'm kind of tired and getting maybe a little bit impatient. So if you're building models or painting minifigs or whatever, I'd say take a look at your project and do the hardest parts first. Seriously, because you'll be fresher, more focused, less frustrated by whatever happened up to that point. And if you do the hardest parts first, they'll be out of the way. And then when you are tired and less focused and more frustrated, then you can move on to the easier parts. Okay. So like in this case, in this particular case, I should have sanded this part of it, this underneath part, the multiply curved part. I should have sanded this first instead of last, because I'd like it to be done, but this is going to take a while. To get the paint out of all these nooks and crannies. And I find that that'll happen too with sometimes when I'm painting minifigs. Is just paint this nice big flat surface first. Why not? And then here I am looking at the model, the minifig, going, yeah, now I need to somehow get this tiny little brush into this tiny little nook without getting paint on everything else. And I'm tired and probably have to go to the bathroom or something. And it's like, oh man, recipe for disaster. So on this particular stream, if you've been watching at all, what just the recurring thing is, for the first couple hours, like up until now, I'm pretty focused and I'm not messing up. But after the last 30 to 45 minutes, I'll find that my focus starts to fade. And what I need to do, and that's how I messed up the other one in a significant way, is right at the end I got impatient and just slammed them together with an excess of cement and almost ruined the surface. I mean, seriously, I almost ruined the part by getting cement on it and having it melt the surface. Is I've been trying my best to remember to save for the end stuff that actually is pretty simple, that can't be messed up very easily. So, for example, today I'm saving for the end the painting of the second coat of aluminum paint on the velocity stacks. Okay. Save that for the end because unless I pop one of those off the clips, which could happen, and lose it, there isn't too much I can do to mess that up. You can't hear it because the microphone filters out extraneous sounds. So I'm working in a basement, right? And it's summer out, and the fan, the air handler for the house is like just a couple feet away, and the fan is running, so it filters out that sound, and a couple of other sounds, like the sound of the little paint shaker thing that I've got that makes a buzzing, whirring sound. But we have dogs, and one of them is, I don't know what's going on up there, but that dog is yelping away. I hope she's under supervision. It sounds like playing, and that's what I hope it is. But yeah, I know you can't hear it. If you could hear it, you know what I was talking about, but you can't, so you don't know what I'm talking about. I might not be talking about anything that's real for all you know. I might have just made all of that up. Yeah, this is the, I really want this to be done. There's a tiny little bit of paint right there that's not coming off. I can't get the sandpaper to it, and it's really tempting to just let it go. These little corners of things again, like before. Paint on top of chrome plating, just around edges where I can't get the sandpaper in. Now, the other thing, this is since I'm giving advice, the how to by learning how not to. Okay, the major oopses that I have. Okay, and what I mean by that is when I'm painting a minifig, and I'm bringing and an oops there means getting a splotch of paint of the wrong color on the wrong place. And I think this is something you should be aware of, is that, when you're doing really fine detail, you're paying your close attention to where you're trying to paint, the spot where you're painting. And so I would say like 80% of the time when I've got a major oops, where I look at it and say, how did that paint get there? How did that splotch of paint get where it's the wrong color, on the wrong surface? At least 80% of the time when that happens for me, it's that I'm really focusing on where I'm painting But the problem is bringing the brush up to or away from the surface that's being painted. Okay, so I'm bringing the brush up to this place where I'm going to put the paint, and I bump it into the wrong spot. Just it gets bumped there. And then sometimes it happens on the way out too, that as I'm removing the brush from the surface, I'll bump it into the surface as I'm pulling it away, because I'm really focusing on where I'm painting, not where I'm not painting. And so I'll suggest that to you if you're doing, minifig painting, is be really careful bringing your brush up to and taking it away from the surface that you're painting. Because if you're going to have an oopsie, I did not mean to bump the brush there. It's very likely to happen as you're bringing the brush up to the work surface or taking it away. So that means paying attention. And I have relearned this lesson the hard way over and over and over. Is really paying attention to the moments when you're not painting. Okay, I don't know how this is going to look after it's primed again. I'm not sure if I've succeeded in keeping the seams between the parts. I mean, you can see the line there. You can see the little white line there where the two parts came together, but I can't feel it. So I'm thinking it's just discoloration because that particular bit of plastic was where the cement was. Okay. So it's not like an indentation, it's just a different color. Well, I won't know that until after I primed it. So I've got these parts now to the point where I can put primer on them again. And I still want to put a stick in them so I can hold them. But I'm not going to use sticky tack again because I learned my lesson. My lesson the hard way by filling the cavity with sticky tack that then needed to be extracted. So I'm going to prime these either today or tomorrow. And on Wednesday, we'll take a look at them. And we'll find out whether the seams have remained disappeared or not. I'm hoping that even though I can sort of see where they are on this one, that they are disappeared. And that this looks like one piece of shaped metal and not like two pieces of plastic joined together midway across. Yeah. The sticky tack needs to come off of this. These are the sticks I'm going to stick back on the inside of it. That was just really dumb. What I should have done is they're just popsicle sticks. I should have just reached over and got new ones instead of messing around with it like that. But I didn't. Okay. The way I'm going to do it this time is I'm cleaning them off. I might as well clean them off, right? I want to see if this works. I'm going to take a little piece of tape. Mm-hmm. And turn it into double-sided tape. I know I can get the tape out. I want to be able to turn it. I want to be able to turn it so I can spray it like all around. Dog stopped barking. I hope that's a good thing. Okay. This is the one that got really messed up, but it actually looks better than the other one. Yeah, look at it flopping around. So what needs to happen now is that after I polish this down a little bit back here, is that I'm going to take a quick break, just a quick bio break. And then I'm going to come back and clean up and wash those and get those ready to be primed. But yeah, I do need to take a quick break. I'm not going to bother putting the break sign up, okay, because it'll be really short. But I'll be back in just a couple of minutes, and we'll move along with doing some other things. See you in a second. Okay. Yeah. So these parts are now back to where they started. I think it was like 2 weeks ago, probably. And I'm hoping that this time around, I don't have to do this over again. Guess that's something I'll be finding out. What I am going to do is take a chunk of paper towel here. And I'm going to wash those things off with isopropyl alcohol. The other thing I'm going to do is these are going to go on these little clips, and then the little clips go in these little holes. So that after I paint them, I can set them up and they can dry without touching another surface, right? Can't lay them down, so they have to hang up, and I can't just hold it for an hour while it dries. Thank you for encouraging the hydration. Yeah, liquids go in, liquids come out, right? I don't mean to be coarse about it, but sometimes you need to take a break to do that. Yeah, so I talked about surface prep, and part of that is washing the piece off, and I'm using a little bit of isopropyl alcohol here. It'll get rid of oils and stuff like that, so that the part is now clean, hopefully. So that the primer will no, this this masking tape thing isn't working as nicely as I had hoped it would. After they're primed, I will be able to see whether the seam is showing or not. And if it is, then I'll either need to sand it down or fill it in and then sand it down. Hopefully, I'll have nice smooth surfaces. So these I'm going to set aside, just put it up over here out of the way. Clean this whole surface off. It's got all sorts of junk on it. I'm going to put a second coat of paint on these. And then, just to make sure it's done, otherwise I'm going to forget about it. And then, okay, you didn't see that, but here, over there, I had these little tubs of water, right? And those little tubs of water are for washing off brushes. And when I set the scissors down, I bumped it, and now I spilled. Fortunately, it's just water. But yeah, that was not good. That was in my little. So I was saying that when I'm painting things, most of the oopses I have where I get paint where I don't want it, like either on another part of the minifig where I don't want that color, or on my hand, or somewhere else, is almost going to and from. I was just reaching over to put a pair of scissors down out of the way, and I banged it right into these things. So that happens to me though, not only on this painting stream, but during the rest of life as well. I just have to say that I bump into stuff way more than I used to. And maybe it's like as I got older, I don't know where my edges are. I'm not quite sure how to describe that. Yeah. I just threw it and landed. It landed in the trash. Where I'll get the camera back, sort of. Wow, that was just so classic. Okay, I'm going to paint these while they're in the tray because there is still some possibility that as I'm brushing the paint on, that one of them that they could pop out, and I want them to, if they're going to pop out of the clip, pop out in the tray where there is a slightly decent chance, a pretty good chance that they'll not land, that they'll land in the tray and not on the floor or something. These are really in the way. I'm going to move them out of the way, hopefully. Okay. I'm going to paint these, put a second coat on them. And there's a reason for a second coat is I couldn't get the foam plating off of them completely. Okay. And so in some places the chrome is showing through. And in a couple of places I actually had to put some filler in because there were little niches, little nicks on the tops of these things. And I filled those in. I do this, I don't have to do it with the other Viejos. They have screw tops, but these have these little clip tops. And sometimes I put a paper towel over it, which sometimes works, is the paint will spatter. Okay. I've had it spatter on me and on my clothes, and just a mess. I'm using a fairly large brush on here because this isn't detail painting. They're small pieces, okay, but we just want to make sure that they're covered. And then I'm looking at them as carefully as I can to make sure there aren't any bubbles in the paint. Sometimes this metallic paint, which is made for airbrushing, okay, the paint itself is designed for airbrushing, and so it's that's just going to have to be that way. It's where I put the filler in, and the filler needs to be cleaned up. I couldn't see it until it was painted, and I should have checked them before I did this. That was one of those. I should have done something first. It's where I put the filler in, is it left a blob, and I didn't see that when the first coat went on. But when I was rotating it under the light, it just became obvious that there was still a major flaw in the appearance of this. I probably, if I were building the model the way it's built on the box cover, these would be very much exposed. You would see them. But in reality, the 1965 version, the parts that I was just redoing, okay, sanding down and basically rebuilding after they were a mess. This is the other one. I'll fix that before I paint it. These are covered up by those covers. Okay. And so I'm probably spending a lot of time fixing up flaws and carefully painting parts that will be totally invisible once this is built. Just saying that I'm probably wasting mine and everybody else's time here on these little bits. The other possibility, and this is a possibility, is that those covers, instead of cementing them on, I might be able to just get them to hold on so that they could come off. And then you could see these parts that I'm spending time on making sure that they look okay. I don't know that. I won't know that until the very end, practically, of assembly, because those are some of the last things to go on. Okay. I need to fix these little bits where I had done some touching up with some filler. Any little bit of very fine sanding. And then I'm going to put paint on it. Yeah, that looks way better. Okay. And let me see if I can get the other one fixed. No, I'm doing stuff you can't even see. Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know how that's going to turn out. But what's one possibility, one possible thing that could happen is that those covers, I might be able to put them on in a way that allows me to like put them on and take them off. The last model I built, the Savoia S21 Porco Rosso's plane, I was actually able to do that. There's some hatch covers on it, hatchways that I was able to get to fit without cementing, and so they can come off to show the detail that was built underneath. This was a whole lot easier when I was like 14 or 15, and I wasn't paying attention to this this kind of detail. It just went so much faster. Well, it's not perfect, but it doesn't have a blob on it anymore. Yeah, so these are acceptable. I would say that in the scheme of things, I wasted a lot of paint. There's like 100 times more paint there than I needed. I should have just stuck with one drop. One drop would have been enough. Okay. Clean this off. Now those the 22. Sorry, I can't. my eyes just they only focus at a certain spot. Okay, it's 22. I don't think those are going to dry enough to put away yet today. Okay. Time passed more quickly than I thought it would. I thought I would have time for those all to dry so I could put them in the box here. But they're not going to go in the box. They're just going to get covered up with a paper towel so they don't get all dusty. And I had a paper towel out here. Oh, yeah, I remember. That paper towel got used up, soaking up the mess I made when I spilled my wash water. There. So, well, I can do that later. You might as well just keep looking at paint dry. You might as well watch that. I need to get the parts that I primed earlier before I forget about them. This is the check to see whether I managed to get these mirrors fixed well enough or not. I think that's okay. I'm going to, since I've got the aluminum paint out, the surface of these mirrors, the front of the mirrors, is going to be painted a different shade of metallic. But the backs of these are going to be painted the same color as those. And so I'm actually going to put a coat of paint on these out of the way. I'm going to leave them on this cardboard because I taped them. They're taped down so that they don't disappear or fly away. I need to get the tape, the cardboard in there. I'm going to go ahead and paint these. And then on Wednesday, I'll be able to see whether they look okay or not. I'll need probably a second coat of paint. But the real question is, did I get them? Did I get them shaped correctly? Get rid of the sprue marks. Like I said, they'll need a second coat of paint. That's without a doubt true. Before I put the second coat of paint on. Why this is behaving so poorly. Okay, that was not good. I shouldn't do anything in the last 15 or 20 minutes of the stream because stuff just happens and it happens badly. Like I can't even get a smooth layer of aluminum paint on a thing. That was not, just don't do that. Okay. Don't pick it up with your fingers like that. This is behaving so poorly. So I want everybody to remind me all the time to not do anything at all, nothing at all in the last 15 minutes of the stream, because by the time it gets to that point, focus is so poor that I can't even spread paint on an item like this. Okay, well, a second coat. There's still a tiny, I'm just looking at this, and I don't know if you can see it or not. Right there, there's just a tiny discontinuity in the rim. Both of these that I thought I had gotten rid of, but it's just not. I don't know if it's good enough or not. I need to reserve judgment until Wednesday, and I'll take a look at it then, and then take a look. It's the tiniest little bit of flaw in what is the most obvious place on the mirror housing. So I'm going to wrap up here. Maybe end up a little bit early because, well, who knows how long it'll take me to talk about what I'm going to be doing. I will talk about not being here next week. That is a for sure thing. I'll be gone all next week, so I won't be doing Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, but I'll be back the week after on the pretty much regular schedule because I'll be traveling. And when I'm traveling, I'm away from here, and I can't do this if I'm not here. So coming back on Wednesday. On Wednesday, I'll be taking these off of these clips. You can't see what I'm talking about. These little velocity stack things, I'll be taking them off of the clips and putting them in this box so that they stay there and don't get lost. Okay. I'll be putting a second coat of paint on these after I check to make sure that I'm satisfied with how well I got rid of the sprue marks. I'll be, between now and then, I'll be repriming these, and then I'll be inspecting them to see if I manage to successfully get rid of the seams and whether they're going to be ready to be painted one more time green. We'll see. And then this turned out to be a happy thing. This was the one good thing that happened. So when I took, this is the rear bumper. They call it a Nerf bar. I'm not sure why. Okay. When I took it off the sprue, these little things were dangling on it. Okay. Like this. One on either side. And they broke off. And I'm going, oh my, there's no contact point. How am I ever going to fix that? Okay. And then I was paying attention to the instructions. I do that now and again. And then I'm looking at the instructions, and those little parts that broke off, they don't belong there at all anyway. Okay? They don't belong there at all anyway. And so I don't have to worry about these. These are now just trash. There's a scrap. There is one thing I need to worry about. Okay? And it's this. There is like this prong. I don't know if you can see it. This that sticks out on this one, but not on this one. And I don't know why it's on one side and not another. I'm looking at the instructions, and it looks like it's not supposed to be there. This would not be the first time or only time. This would not be the only time when there was a piece of plastic in a place where it shouldn't have been to begin with. And in this particular case, it fits on like this. Yeah, that's not supposed to be there. So this side is supposed to look like this side. And this has a bit of plastic and chrome plating sticking off. Okay, so this piece is going to require a good deal of cleaning up because there are seam marks, there are sprue bits, there's a thing that shouldn't be there that is, so it needs to be symmetric. Even if it was intentional. No, it just gets in the way. It keeps the part from fitting. So this is about the third time on this model where there has been something that looks like it's intentionally molded onto it that shouldn't be there at all. There was two of those on the rear suspension. The parts of the rear suspension, there were parts that were just not supposed to be there. It was like it was built for something else. Well, I'm glad too. I'll be back on Wednesday. And probably Friday this week. So hopefully you'll join in again Wednesday. I really I appreciate you coming by and joining in on chat. I really like that. So on Wednesday, I'm going to be taking these off and putting them in the box. I'm going to be painting the mirrors. Hopefully, I will be looking at these bits and going, oh, that worked out really well. They're ready to be painted. Hopefully that will be the case. I'll be cleaning up this part and a couple of other chrome-plated parts that need to be primed and painted. And I'll be working on the tires. Yes, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 10 until 1. Not until 2, but only until 1. 10 until 1. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Eastern Daylight Time, U.S. time. So, yeah. And I'm really pretty regular about that. Unless I'm traveling, I hardly ever miss. Okay? So I'll be back on Wednesday, same time. And I hope to see you then. Thanks so much for joining in. And the new follows as well. I really appreciate it. So while I'm doing this stuff on Wednesday, maybe I'll talk about, usually I'll talk about nostalgia things, like I've been talking about old race cars and how dangerous it used to be, and how I used to watch races with my dad and my brother, and we actually saw a car fly off the track once. Seriously, I might repeat that story. It's pretty amazing. Safety was not quite the same in the 1950s and 60s as it is now. Okay, well, I'll miss you next week, but hopefully. Oh, yeah, here. Since you're watching, let me just show you something. I haven't done that. Maybe I can do this without hurting anything. I'm actually some stuff has gotten built so far. I got the front suspension and the rear suspension done on this. I've got some other parts all painted and ready to go. So yeah, I mean, it's not like nothing has happened, but it's just really slow progress. Did pretty well on the instrument panel. I think that came out looking pretty well. So I'm pretty happy about how this is going. Those little stacks that are in the clips, they get attached here into those little holes. So yeah, I mean, the car is coming along. Okay, well, when you're back, maybe I'll talk about old races again. So thanks everybody. Thanks for joining in. I will be back on Wednesday at about 10 o'clock Eastern time, and maybe continue to make some really slow but steady progress on this thing. And if I get hung up and can't work on something, thanks so much. I really appreciate that. It's very kind. I've got some other things I can be working on as well. Again, thanks everybody. Look at that. Thanks everybody. I'll see you on Wednesday.